Today we're looking at this, the Canon EF 55-250 STM IS lens. I've been really excited to do a review of this lens for a while now because it is just one of those really cheap, cheerful and fantastic lenses that not many people know about. We're going to take a look at its build quality, possible uses, the functions that it has, its image quality. We're going to compare it to other similar lenses as well, and we'll talk about the price. Hey, welcome back. It is great to see you here again. Like I said, this is something I've been really excited to talk about because it's a lens that I discovered while trying to find the perfect events and live streaming lens. At first, I got one because I thought it is convenient and it was reasonably priced, but when I actually started using it, I was very surprised by just how sharp it was. For something so cheap, so small and so light, it has no right to be as good as it is. This is an EFS lens, which means it is designed to be used on Canon's crop sensor cameras. However, if you have an R-mount camera, if you use an adapter, you can use this on pretty much any R-mount camera available. The only cameras you can't use this lens on are the full-frame EF cameras, like the 5D Mark IV and 6D Mark II. There are several other versions by Canon of this focal range, and you must try and avoid those because they look like a bargain because they're slightly cheaper, not that much cheaper. They're pretty much the same price, and they're just called the EFS 55-250mm 2 or 2IS, or even the original IS version. The one you want to get is the STM version. This is the special one. So be careful if you're looking to get one of these lenses, make sure you get the STM version. It has optical stabilization, that's why it's got the IS in the name. Unlike Canon's newer lenses, it actually has switches to toggle on and off, automatic focus and manual focus, and also turn the stabilizer on and off. And if you're using IBIS or digital image stabilization, that button will turn all of it off completely. So it's quite a handy thing to have on the lens. As this is an EFS lens, you need to factor in the crop factor. While it might be an f4 to f5.6, you're going to get the depth of field of an f6.6 to f9. However, it is letting in f4 and f5.6 quantities of light. Probably the most exciting thing about this lens is that you can buy this lens new for about £300. If you buy it secondhand on eBay, for example, you can get this lens for less than £150. That is a bargain for this lens, and I want you to keep that price tag in mind for everything that we talk about in this review. Keep it in mind especially for this first bit. The build quality is not great. The lens is entirely plastic. It doesn't feel like particularly good plastic, it feels a bit cheap. There's some rubberization on the focus ring and the zoom ring, and the lens mount is also plastic. That is not ideal. It also has no weather sealing. Not a great start. If you drop this lens from a height onto concrete, hard surface, it might break. And if you drop it on the mount, that will break and your lens will be stuffed. So keep that in mind. This lens needs to be taken care of. It's going to be delicate, and it's not going to like getting any moisture or dust in it. But again, this is a very cheap lens, so you've got to expect cheap build. If you can see past that, well, then you've got a bit of a treat here. And we'll take a look at comparative lenses and how much they cost. When you take into account the crop factor of this lens, because it's meant to be used on a 1.6 times APS-C crop sensor, you're going to get the equivalent focal range of 88 to 400 millimeters. f6.6 to f9. The build quality is not great. It's a bit cheap. However, that also makes it extremely light. And for an equivalent of a 100 to 400 millimeter lens, that is tiny and ridiculously light. It's the kind of thing that you can pop into your camera bag, it takes up hardly any room and adds very little weight. So there's not really any downsides to keeping this in your camera bag. The comparable lenses that you'll find out there are the 100 to 400 millimeter full frame equivalents. And so you have the Canon ISUSM version 1 and version 2. You also have a Sigma version, and most of them are at least double the cost, such as the new RF version of the 100 to 400, and that's an f5.6 to f8. So it's kind of similar in terms of the amount of light going in and the depth of field that you're going to get out of it. And that one is £700, so it is double the cost of this new, and more than 4 times the price if you get this lens secondhand, which I would recommend. Nothing wrong with going secondhand, just be smart about it. So these 100 to 400mm lenses from all manufacturers, they are gigantic and they are expensive. And I'm sure a colleague of mine, Fraser, he's going to look at this and go, obviously the 100 to 400 is way better quality. Yes, you're going to get better quality from a bigger lens, a heavier lens, and a more expensive lens, and it's going to be weather sealed, but if you're not using that focal range very often, which I really don't, it's not worth me spending all that money and keeping that gigantic lens in my bag if I'm hardly going to use it. If it's a lens that you use all the time, then absolutely, you'd want to spend the extra money and a bit more space in your bag to that lens. If it's a lens you'll use rarely or every now and then, why not get a cheaper lens that's smaller, lighter, and has almost as good image quality. I always approach these from a video perspective. So the two things that make this lens extremely useful, the built-in image stabilization, it's actually pretty effective, even at the longer focal lengths. So that is a great addition to have. More importantly, especially for video, it focuses very fast and completely silently. You cannot hear this lens focus. It is brilliant for video. Because it's a stepping motor as well, it doesn't have any jitters as it goes through, it just smoothly gets to the focus. Perfect for video. Which brings me on to the possible uses for this lens. Now, you could use it as a smaller, cheaper alternative to 100 to 400 for sports, for portraits, or how I use it for events and live streaming. I can set this up on one of my live streaming cameras, and it is very small and discreet and can fit in a crowded room full of people and just tucked out the way. It has a very long reach on it, and it actually lets in quite a lot of light for the focal range that it is, especially when combined with a super 35mm sensor. Before this, I was using camcorders for live streaming and events, and the largest sensor those tend to have are 1-inch sensors, which when combined with the lenses that go from f2.8 to f6.3, you lose a lot of light at the long end. And often these live streams and events are not very well lit, so you want all the help you can get. So an f5.6 lens on a super 35mm camera is excellent for low light events. Yeah, it's not the same as a 1.4 or 2.8, but when you're at 400mm equivalent, good luck finding an f2.8 or a f1.4 lens at that range. You're walking around like this. So it's very convenient for live streams and events. And with that absolutely silent autofocus, it means that you can have a microphone on your camera and it won't pick up any focusing noises, unlike a lot of lenses out there, including all the Sigmas that I use. Especially the 18 to 35, that thing is so noisy when it focuses. You cannot have on-camera microphones when you're recording video on that lens. So I was trying to show off how this lens works with animal shots, so I tried to get some bird photographs and some bird video. Now, the reach on it is probably not long enough for bird photography. You'd want a longer lens for that. And also, I'm not the type of person that photographs birds. So I was well out of my comfort zone. These are the kind of shots that I was getting, and a lot of them were out of focus. It turns out it's very difficult to photograph birds. However, I then turned on the animal auto detect on the camera. Is fantastic. Yeah, it helps out people like me. Given its focal range and the depth of field and the quality of the out of focus backgrounds, this might actually be a pretty good lens for portraits. Now, I've never used it for that, but I will try and organize a portrait shoot and use this lens to show you some of those photos. So if that sounds like a kind of video that you would like to see, then watch this space. Now, I asked you to keep in mind the price when talking about all these different aspects, and that is especially appropriate for when we talk about the image quality of this lens, because it is quite a pleasant surprise. This lens is razor sharp. What little chromatic aberration there is corrected very easily in camera or in software. There's not that much. And the quality of the out of focus backgrounds or the bokeh, it is sublime. All of that in a small, light package that you can pick up for less than £150. That's a bargain. Check out some of these samples. One thing that I'm always really keen to get across in these videos is that you don't need to spend a lot of money to get fantastic quality gear, especially when you're first starting out. There are so many articles and so many videos online that will talk about the latest and most expensive cameras and lenses and which ones you should get, because these are the professional lenses. The thing that makes a lens professional is the person behind the camera. So, just because a lens is cheap does not mean that it can't be a professional quality lens. So if you're looking for a lens in the 100 to 400mm, or at least equivalent, definitely consider this one, because it is one of the cheapest lenses out there and one of the best that I've used when it comes to image quality. I would have no issues cutting footage from this lens in with lenses that are 5 to 6 times the price of it. When I first started out doing professional video and photography, there were some jobs that I would turn down because I didn't think I had the right professional gear for it. I knew that the kind of people who were doing these kind of portrait shoots or these kind of commercial shoots were using the top of the line, most expensive lenses. And at the time it was just something that I couldn't afford, couldn't get. So I thought, oh, I probably can't do those jobs because I don't have that lens. And that definitely wasn't the right attitude to have, because it's not about the gear, it's about you and your attitude towards the client, the work, and your approach to constantly improving your video and your photos. So hopefully this inspires you to check out some more affordable gear and still go out and create high quality, professional quality images and video. So get out there and get shooting. But if you have some time to kill, then definitely do check out some of my other videos, and I shall see you in the next one. Take it easy.